Right, let's check out the BBC News website for news about junior doctors in England. They say they are planning 9 days of strikes after talks collapse. So the first 3 days of that strike will be on Wednesday this week, with some more in January, up to 6 days in one go. And of course, the talks are about how much the junior doctors' pay should go up by, because they say that they've been hard done by for more than a decade. Well, we can talk to a junior doctor now. It's Dr. Anna Warrington. Hello, doctor.
Hi.
Right. Just remind us what the government has offered you thus far and why it's not good enough for you to call off your strikes.
So the junior doctors are striking not just about pay, but more about the principle of restoring the NHS workforce so that we can look after our patients properly. At present, our pay has been eroded year on year. The government appears to be pursuing a policy of pay erosion until they make a credible commitment to stop that policy of pay erosion. It seems to me impossible that their recruitment ambitions to restore the NHS workforce could possibly be met.
Just to be clear, you're asking for, when you talk about pay restoration, you want a 35% pay increase.
It is shocking when you consider that junior doctors have suffered a 35% pay erosion over the last decade. At present, we've been offered something that accounts for less than a pay rise or even a sustaining pay package for more than 50% of doctors for this year alone. Restoration hasn't been attempted. And again, it's not about the pay, it's about the principle. If the government continues to apply a policy of pay erosion to doctors, how can they possibly hope to undo the extensive damage their policy has done to the workforce in the NHS?
Have you come...
Again, the important point, of course, is, as we've mentioned loads of times, like, they might leave to Australia where they're getting paid more money. It's incredibly depressing. If there is this shortfall in pay, they'll go elsewhere where they're getting more money. We need to keep them here. It's such a waste of money to train them up to be excellent doctors, for them to then go away to another country, taking all their talents with them. Well, they'll get paid more. We should pay them more. Otherwise, they'll just leave. They're taking them for granted currently.
To accept, though, that the government is just not going to give you 35%. That's just too much.
I am still hopeful that this government recognises the harm that its policies have caused to patients. At the moment, we have reduced life expectancy, increased waiting lists, and increased excess deaths on a daily basis, irrespective of strike action. The government has
probably made worse by strike action, though, to be fair.
There is no evidence at present that strike action has caused any excess deaths, but there is plenty of evidence that chronic underfunding of the NHS and workforce mismanagement will have contributed to excess deaths. And the government needs to get serious about this. It needs to restore the workforce so that there are enough of us to look after the patients. At present, there are not. The government has declared high ambitions to recruit thousands of doctors to restore the workforce. How can it conceivably recruit if it can guarantee any prospective doctors a 30% pay cut over the next decade?
If the statisticians crunch the numbers and say, actually, yeah, the junior doctors' strike did lead to an increase in excess deaths, how will you feel?
Awful. There is not a single excess death which is acceptable to me. That is why I am forced to strike, because there are excess deaths every day. In the first half of this year, there are estimated to have been 28,000 excess deaths. And those weren't related to the strikes. Statistically, they are likely to be related to the government's chronic underfunding of the healthcare service. Okay. Isn't that shocking? Let's do something about it. Let's get enough doctors. Let's stop cutting their pay. Let's make the future of medicine in this country a viable career choice for me and my colleagues, and for the patients we care for.
Right, Stuart, what do you make of what Dr. Anna's been saying there?
It's an absolute disgrace and it's nonsense. We spend £181 billion on the NHS every year.
Yeah, being tendered into private contracts. It's still less per capita than a lot of other countries in the OECD, and yet we're still having all of these problems, right? You could literally just have not got bothered all the Landsley reforms that screwed things up, all this internal market stuff. They continue selling off these trusts to people like Centene and Virgin Care. All of this pandemic money, right, that's on the books as NHS spending, we now know loads of which was like fraudulent or at the very least corrupt or unusable. And you're still here saying we're spending record amounts, right? Except it's not going in the right places. In fact, we're spending loads of money on nurses and doctors being hired through agencies at private contractor rates.
Or this year, 40% on pay. The idea that cancelling or postponing 1.1 million operations is not going to have an impact and cost people's lives and everything else is complete nonsense. They need to get back around the table. They've been offered 8.8%. The problem is that what was once a respected professional representative body is now a hard left trade union. It's trying to...
Well, they're militant, are they? Oh, they're a militant hard left trade union wanting to be paid what they were paid in 2010. They've barely been on strike since they went to war with Jeremy Hunt over the junior doctors' contract reform. The idea that they're the hard left because they're finally at a breaking point after being routinely undermined during the pandemic and not properly dealing with the fact that these people are on the front line saving people's lives, clapping outside our doors for these people, banging together the pots and pans. Look, they can pay their bills with claps, chap. They can pay all of their bills with claps. And unfortunately, they are just hard left militant trade unionists for expecting more than claps and 8.8%.
Act tough in order to get a completely unrealistic pay award. They should get back. They have a vocation. They're well respected generally as junior doctors.
Can they pay their bills with respect? Can we maintain the workforce in our NHS by offering doctors more respect when they can get respect plus more money in another country, which we don't want them to leave to? We really don't. We can't afford for these people to leave.
They need to put patients first and call off this strike. It's incredibly damaging. I think the Labour agree as well. Labour actually took some very, very important decisions in reforming the NHS between 97 and 2010.
Yeah, important, terrible decisions, right? It's crazy. It's crazy how they continually... Tories will praise New Labour for their actions on things like NHS privatisation, NHS marketisation, internal targets, all this stuff that just obviously failed. Like, we're seeing the failure of New Labour on things like the changing to the dentist contract, which took 10% out of the NHS workforce of dentists, filtering through now where we had a headline today from the BBC, which was literally NHS dentistry is gone for good. And they'll praise it. And the Tories will say it was really good that the New Labour took steps in reforming the NHS. I mean, yeah, of course the Tories like it. Yeah, idiot centrists and liberals in the media and in the population just think, well, red team good, blue team bad. Blair was this absolute saint. Iraq War was just a little bit of a mess that they did. No, they keep screwing things up internally in the NHS all over the shop.
They're not going to get 35%. They're hurting the most vulnerable people and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Moya, I heard a snort of derision from you there.
I just think, why are you characterising getting fair pay as a hard left position? That's quite a disservice to the Tory party, is it not? Junior doctors in Scotland...
I mean, she's so right. I mean, it's deliberate framing. It's deliberate framing. That, well, if these guys thinking that fair pay is hard left, then anybody asking for fair pay is hard left. But if you're anything other than hard left, your reaction would be, I will just accept what I've been given. I'll be happy with what they've deigned to give me, what my boss has done, what the state has deigned to design as my wage, right? Anything other than just mute acceptance of what your wage has been given to you. Otherwise, you're hard left, you're a communist. You don't want to be a communist, do you, for thinking that wage increases and fair pay is a good thing? But of course, what that's going to do is just tell, well, I guess I'm a socialist now. I guess I'm a leftist because I think we should have fair pay. They do this all the time, but they'll just say, well, this bad thing is socialism. And I'm like, well, actually, no, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's a good thing with this thing you're saying here. You can just try and tell me that it's bad by linking it with socialism. But all you're doing is making me like socialism more. You're making me more left-wing by saying only the hard left want this really good thing that everybody likes. Okay, well, I guess I'm hard left now. The threat that they pose by saying, well, if you want this thing, you're a hard left. Well, that threat goes away if you try and link it to all these good things that people want, like fair pay.
Scotland.
Because we keep
Sorry,
hearing...
Tim, can you let me finish?
No, but I think
Junior doctors in Scotland accepted a pay deal in August of 12.4% pay for 23-24. Is that not fair? That deal was settled by the devolved nations, but over here, the Conservative government keeps junior doctors immiserated, stops them getting fair pay, and the strikes will continue. They've spent millions on bringing in agency workers in the NHS to fill staff shortages. In the Northwest, I think the Royal College of Nursing...
Yeah, but hang on, Scottish doctors wanted 35% as well and settled for a lot less.
We're offering 8.8%. That's nowhere near even 12.4% is my point.
Yeah, but 12 is still a long way from 35.
But even if they don't get 35, we're still...
Who cares? The 35 point is the starting point. I can't believe... Why is it always the host on Politics Live always tries to undermine the left-leaning people on the panel were like, nonsense as well, saying, well, it's not 35%, is it? Well, clearly it shows that the negotiating position they were willing to be negotiated down to was around about just over 12%, right? And this is why, when the Scottish government can give them this pay deal, well, the government in Westminster, why can't they do it? If if the negotiations were willing to happen by the same trade union, right, the BMA, they were willing to take this dispute number, this initial figure, that the start high then go lower, the classic sales pitch. I've worked in sales. I know how this works. Then surely it stands to reason if they went and said with a better offer that was close to the Scottish offer, then they'd be able to have the same kind of settlement. But the 35% is just a starting point. It's also just a specific, more kind of general point. This symbolic point about pay restoration, this symbolic point about the level to which the money's been taken out of people's pockets since then.
Still offering below what the Scottish doctors get, and that is insulting. The government is not making a serious attempt to actually negotiate with the junior doctors, and they're taking
they've had to find £1.3 billion in overtime payments to cover the absences of striking doctors.
But they're funding millions of pounds to fund agency workers.
That's money that's not going into frontline healthcare.
Yeah, if you'd have solved the dispute by offering a reasonable pay offer, you wouldn't have had to pay any of this overtime pay. None of that would have to be paid if you just settled the dispute months ago. It's been going on for months. You've had ages to settle this dispute. And you wouldn't have to pay any of this money. That's money you've chosen to spend. You're coming onto this panel to defend your record in government and saying, oh, we had to spend all of this money on agency workers and on overtime pay to fill the gaps in the strike action. Yeah, the strike action that you didn't settle. That's your fault. You're indicting yourself. What are you doing?
Of short-term thinking that this government has, which is that instead of negotiating with strikers out of ideology, they're bringing in short-term workers. It happens with migration as well. We're bringing in workers from overseas because we have got these huge vacancies. Instead of actually funding these roles properly. But apparently that's a hard left position.
Right, let's let Tim make his point.
Look, I think everyone has sympathy for NHS staff. They served the country incredibly well during the pandemic. But you hear spokesmen from
yeah, they've served the country very well, but we've given them the claps now, and they're not happy with the claps. How dare they? Not happy with claps, are we? No, the claps go too far.
Right, you hear spokesmen from junior doctors, and again, it's not enough for them just to talk about pay. They make political points about NHS funding and about the state.
Political points about NHS funding? How dare they? It's not like the NHS is a political institution. It's run by the government. Of course it's political, you moron. Yeah, of course it's political. What else would it be? It's the NHS. It's a publicly owned service. The politicians run it. They're responsible for the funding that it gets. Yeah, of course they make political statements. That's what trade unions are for. They're political entities. You insane. What the hell are you talking about? This man's career as he's a career journalist. He's been like the high-level conservative journalist for years. And he's out here saying, well, I can't believe it, trade unions would make political statements. Yeah, of course they're making political statements. It's their job. It's their job to make political statements. What the fuck are you talking about? My voice will come down, by the way. He's just broken my brain.
Of the NHS, and
which they're a big part. They're part of it.
They can do, but it's more than pay. There is a political agenda. They have a policy objective in how they think the NHS should be funded. And if you look now at the British state, we have the highest tax burden in our history, and yet you have the NHS and pensions basically gobbling up nearly all of the growth of public spending. And Labour, of course, they will complain about NHS cuts, but you ask them what they're going to do about it. They have no tax rise plan of any kind. What we have to do is we have to live within our means. And junior doctors will not get a better...
How about we stop giving money to the people who are the CEOs of the private contractors? We bring these people back in-house rather than paying our money to Sodexo or paying for agency staff billions of pounds of overtime pay instead of having an actual settlement, right? Or the money on agency nurses. All of this extra spending that we shouldn't need to do because the government is terrible at managing this stuff, right? They always say, oh, there are too many managers in the NHS. Yeah, the government. There's too many conservatives governing it. And we're still not doing well because they've just continually failed, right? There's a knock-on problem of austerity that the supposed ring-fenced budgets reduced it per capita and as a percentage of GDP from 2010 to 2017. Or NAF PPE, yeah. Or we need to live within our means. We can't live within our means because we have anemic economic growth because half our country is sick. And that's why our labour force participation rate is so low, which is affecting our productivity.
Better deal under Labour, because Labour, while they complain and moan about spending, no, there isn't more in the pot to be spent.
Complain and moan away, Seema.
They could just do a wealth tax, right? Or equalise capital gains tax. I mean, at least Monty has one good point here, which is that Labour are going to moan about NHS funding and have no plans to fund it extra. No plans. No plans for any extra funding outside of the non-dom tax status, which is just going into the NHS workforce plan because it's a pittance, right? Because this is what you're getting. Vote Labour, get Tory.
With all due respect, Tim and Stuart, I think we have to be so careful about the language we use, and particularly as politicians, there is no need to try to be inflammatory here. I think we need to also, in terms of criticisms and going beyond the issue, to make this party political in a way that it is not. It is about our hard-working staff in our NHS. It is about the future of the NHS. It is about the crisis that the NHS is in, and it is absolutely right
turn
to
those
say
words into a number.
It is absolutely right to say it is absolutely right to say that there is a crisis in the NHS that was prior to the strikes. What is really, really important to recognise is that it has been under the Tories' watch that we have seen the longest junior doctor strike in the history of the NHS. Nobody wants to go on strike. That's what doctors have told me. And it is really important that the government stays around the table and gets back round the table. There hasn't been a history of the government doing this. There needs to be a solution. You're right about it's been incredibly difficult, and you will know that under Steve Barclay it was particularly bad, and very little meeting over time.
You're not offering any concrete proposal at all.
You haven't mentioned the word patient.
One at a time.
Haven't mentioned the word patients.
We have said, and you're right. Actually, the strike does affect patients, and it is very important to recognise, because none of us want to see the millions of appointments affected. But we have said, and we've been honest, that we wouldn't promise the 35%, but that doesn't mean you're not around the table.
34%, 33%, 8%.
And well, we're not negotiating, are we? But the point is here that you need to have a process, and one of trust and respect between government and the NHS and those who are negotiating. I didn't hear respect.
Labour keeps saying this, like they keep saying, "Oh well, we'll be better because we'll show them more respect. Like, we'll show them more courtesy when we are refusing to meet their pay demands." Like, that won't cut the mustard, because at the end of the day, they know that these strikes are foundational to the continuation of the NHS as a public service free at the point of use. They know full well the recruitment and retention issues that plague the staffing in our NHS means it's necessary for them to go on strike to save the service as it exists right now, to get the Tories to actually properly invest in the workforce like they need to. It's inevitable, and that respect is not good enough, right? It may be that the BMA are less likely to strike when Labour are in government, but given what Wes Streeting has said, given their future health minister, like cabinet health secretary, has already said about junior doctors themselves and the BMA and GPs and all the kind of malarkey that he's talked about already, do you think they're going to be just as nice or nicer to Wes Streeting than they are to these people? I find it difficult to believe, given the record Streeting has already.
Today, I'm sorry to say, in the dialogue that we've just had, there needs to be respect. There needs to be a much more of a fit-for-purpose industrial relations, fit for our modern times. And I think an investment in the NHS that we have said with ending non-dom tax status and other matters. But let's say this as well. Let's make sure that there is a dialogue here that looks to our record as well. There was not a single national strike in 13 years under Labour, and that wasn't because there weren't tough times.
It was because
there was respect and there was long-term planning together. Respect and long-term planning together.
Okay, let's go back to Dr. Warrington. Anna, there's
very interested to hear what she has to say here, because my God, that's an absolute mess. Because again, just no one has any solutions, because they don't want to say just put more money in, which is the solution, right? Because it's not just about pay for doctors, it's about capital investment in the service itself. But there's so many things to be solved just by giving them the pay, getting them back around the table, taking out all the agency pay, all the overtime pay, getting a more productive workforce in this country and increasing labour force participation by having a better functioning NHS. Because again, the strike could have been over months ago and they've done nothing. But Labour are coming here with platitudes as well.
The strike in January that's penciled in is for 6 days. Why is it okay to have that length of strike when the previous ones have been half that?
Look, I'm really disappointed by the quality and nature of the conversation your panelists have contributed. They have not paid the point, which is that the healthcare system is already in crisis. These aren't junior doctors who are after a pay rise because they want to go on a sunny holiday.
Answer my point about the length of the next strike.
These are doctors who are committed These are doctors who are committed to the care of their patients. It's time the government got serious and around the table to discuss solutions to the healthcare workforce crisis that they themselves have generated. We've been available all year to have meaningful discussions to solve this issue. It's them who's pushed us to consider this in the middle of winter.
Why is a 6-day strike okay?
We need to do what we can to force the government to take this issue seriously. This is ultimately in the interests of patients. We want to do our job properly. There need to be more of us. To have more of us, you need to have a financial settlement that makes a career like mine financially viable into the future. At the moment, if I'm staring down the barrel of another 35% pay cuts over the next decade, that becomes non-viable for me. And people like me will look for careers outside of healthcare within the NHS. It's just simple that will happen. So the government needs to pay attention, recognise what it's doing to damage patient care and patient safety. And if no doctor takes this decision lightly, but we will need to strike to force the government to come to the table. They have made us do that.
Anna, are you feeling any optimism about the new year and when the talks resume?
I'm always optimistic that someone sensible will come from the government and have a positive discussion with us.
And also, just not to delve into your finances, but are you coping financially with not being able to do all this work?
There is plenty of evidence that junior doctors are using additional shifts to make their ends meet. We all are paid a fixed amount, which is widely visible on the internet should you search our contractual terms. But there's plenty of evidence that many of us are having to do more work to make ends meet, as are many other people across this country at present. But it's not about my personal finances or indeed anyone else's. This is about having enough doctors to do the job to look after our patients in this workforce, in this health.
She keeps going on. It's really important that she keeps talking about the ways in which the pay is impacting recruitment and retention and the staffing crisis and the necessity to make sure that there is a viable career path for health professionals in this country, make sure that they stay in the profession, they don't leave for another country. She keeps making this point. She made it in her opening statement. And yet the panel keep going, well, what about the greedy doctors asking for 35%? Is this reasonable with this pay? Why don't you get around the table? I was like, we're not even getting to the core of the issue here. And like Moya would have made an excellent point, but even she isn't getting to the real core of the issue, which is that, of course, if you want to have an NHS, you have to pay these people enough what the market demands that you do, right? It's a global market, the labour market, and you have to compete with other countries for it. I wish we didn't have to. I wish we didn't have to care about whether they leave to Australia. I'm desperate for them to not to leave to other countries because we've trained them up. They're part of our society, right? The taxpayers' money has funded the educational institutions that goes into getting these people to be trained in this in the first place. It's a waste of money, a waste of time, and an absolute waste of talent for these people to be shipped off to New Zealand or Australia for them to earn way more money there for some reason, rather than actually keeping them as part of our workforce and the extra productive capacity of our NHS. And they just ignore it.
Health service. And at the moment, we don't have enough of us. And what we need is a viable and attractive package so that we can recruit the missing doctors and restore the NHS so that we can deliver patients the care that they need and deserve.
Anna, thank you very much for joining us on Politics Live today. Stuart, do you think this is coming at a political cost to the government now? You're clearly very angry with the doctors and you think they're negotiating in bad faith, but how do you think the voters perceive this? How do you think they allocate the blame?
Well, I think the voters are understanding that there has to be long-standing reform under any party because we've got a demographic time bomb. We
don't need reform. I mean, what we really is reform, I guess. We need to go back to what it was before the Blairites got their grubby mitts on it and privatised loads of it and put in internal markets, right? Like, we need to go back to what it was when it was an actual public service, when it just makes sense. All the privatisation of markets, it's all failed. It's all bad. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. It's bad.
We've got issues around, for instance, obesity, stroke, heart disease, all the other things that are endemic with an older population. And every party's got that challenge. And I just think this is a very unhelpful distraction. If money isn't the issue, then why don't the junior doctors in England and Wales match the Scottish offer and accept, that there has been progress and perhaps come back next year?
The government in England's offering less than the government in Scotland did.
They've had 8.8%, which is twice the rate of inflation.
And is less than the Scottish government offered.
Whoa. Oh, they've had a payoff that's twice the rate of inflation. Yeah, now that inflation has come down, right? The prices have increased over the last 2 years by over 19%. Well, that's less than half what they've been offered, and they're still working on the same pay that they were having before the pandemic started. How fucking dare you? Oh, it's double the rate of inflation now. See, exactly what I told you. I told you this shit. I told you this shit when I started covering the strikes a year ago. I told you they were going to wait for inflation to come down and say, look, what the headline rate of inflation is lower. Even though prices haven't dropped, the rate at which prices are changing has dropped. The pay has stayed stagnant. They're still behind 17, 18, 19% in terms of real terms pay. How dare you? Oh, these people, they grind my gears so much. Oh, I hate them. I hate them. It's such deliberate tactic. That's why Steve Barclay didn't come to the table with the train drivers, with the RMT, with the barristers, with the people in the NHS. They kept stalling because they knew once inflation came down, they could say their pay offer is ahead of inflation. They're asking for too much when their wages are actually way behind real terms costs. Oh, it's so nasty, a little trick. Oh. But I told you it would happen. I told you they'd do it. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.